In previous videos, I've covered a few of the different courses on Disc Golf Valley, including Grizzly, Gulch, Lakeside, and Oak Hill. And so I decided to tackle Crowsnest in a slightly different way. And this video is going to be a little bit longer because I'm trying to change my approach a little bit. So what I'm going to do with a pretty standard bag, other than I have a musket in my bag as opposed to an Explorer, which I normally throw, is I'm going to play Crowsnest, and instead of trying to shoot for a particular score, I'm just going to throw a bunch of different shots to show you guys how to approach some of these holes. And so hole 1 is actually, according to the game, the easiest hole in the game. Now that's not according to me, that's according to the course ratings or hole ratings in the code of the game. This is easier than any of the sunshine holes. So the first approach there was a sidearm river. You could also do a sidearm explorer. Another option, if you aim a little higher, is a sidearm fuse, which will actually go a little further than you'd expect. So those are a couple different options, pretty standard stuff. You can also use a fuse not using a forehand, but using backhand. So you gotta have to watch how high you aim so you don't hit the arch that's right there, but that works out pretty well. And the fuse is not gonna slide long. Another option, and you'll see this with some ace run videos, is you can go wide right. Now that musket is a little too much disc, so you'll see here that I miss and it goes way long out of bounds. But you can use sometimes a Pioneer, or maybe don't use a 10 speed, maybe a Glide Explorer. But there are some lines where if you get favorable wind, you can do an ace run. Say, for example, if you're grinding on hole 1 of a daily tournament and you're just having trouble getting it through the arch, you can go that wide right route. There's some pretty good options. So there's just a few methods you can use to approach that one. Hole 2, the standard play here, if you've watched any of my other videos, like my Pro Tour video, is just a fuse a little either right at it or a little to the left. And so the fuse will naturally turn over and slide up there. It almost never goes long. So that's the play. And I'm actually trying to miss this a little bit, because if I put it too close, I get a tap in, and then I can't show you a variety of shots. You can also do a forehand fuse, but you notice that one's really short. So that might be one you choose to use if there's a tailwind, which again, the wind doesn't have a huge effect, but it can a little bit. And so a forehand river is also an option. Now you're starting to step up the speed of the disc, so you have to worry a little bit about it sliding, but I'd say a forehand river is about the same as a backhand fuse, maybe a little different. Now if you want to ace run it using a backhand river or a backhand explorer, again, I find that the river and the explorer are pretty much the same disc distance-wise, just the river is straighter and the explorer has a more reliable fade. And so if you really, really want to get greedy, I mean, you're going to go out of bounds, but you can always use the musket. And that is an accurate windbreak musket. It's not even an accurate glide, and you can see it just goes way, way, way long. But if you can dial in the distance, aiming a little lower, there's a good chance that you can put it in the basket. So I'm actually trying to put this in the basket. And so second shot there with the accurate windbreak is in the basket. So I would not recommend that unless you're really, really ace running. So hole 3, I'll show the safe play. So those of you that don't have the drivers to get there, you can play. This is probably one of the easiest birdies in the game, outside of obviously like Sunshine 1 and 2, heck, any of the Sunshine except the par 4. And so you can play a backhand fuse, you can play a sidearm river. And the way this game is set up now, if you're throwing any of the straight discs, I mean, even the musket here. Now musket, I'm actually going to go for the green there, but you can play it anywhere out to the left and then play it over and get your birdie. So now I would never throw the musket. This is actually me, so that almost stuck. The accurate windbreak musket is probably not the best choice for this, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to throw it a few times to show you guys some different aim spots. So you can aim higher, lower, put a little anhyzer on it, hyzer it. Like there's just a lot of different ways you can do this. So I'm just trying a bunch of different ways to see if I can get it to stick. And if I tried this enough, I could get it to land in the green area. I mean, that's not an issue. But again, if this was a real round, there's absolutely no way I'm throwing that musket, but I don't know if I've ever really tried the accurate windbreak musket on this hole. I'll do the accurate glide. I know I've got a couple aces on that, or I'll throw a driver, and so this is part of that where if you want to fast forward a little bit and don't really care about all the different angles. And eventually here I just kind of get bored with it and realize that if I'm never going to actually throw that, why don't we try a different disc? And so most of the time here I will throw a driver. I'll throw either a recoil, or I'll sometimes throw the Light Glide Ballista. And so the recoil has a lot of end fade to it, so you really have to play it wide right and kind of force it over. And if you do that, you can get a good shot here. And I didn't get a chance to throw the ballista because it was parked, but again, don't throw a musket unless you've got a tailwind, but even then it's probably not the best choice. Okay. Hole 4, there are a couple routes where you can go kind of up and over for eagle, but the wind does not lend itself to doing that because it's a one wind left to right. So I'm going to show you some of the different birdie plays. So the first is just a fuse, second is a river, and a river is just a longer fuse. So all you're trying to do is just play it anywhere out here. And honestly, with the 912 update, the skips aren't that bad, so you're not as really worried about going up over those ledges and out of bounds. So if you want to get a little more aggressive, so that one I threw the musket, which again, I don't really throw the accurate windbreak musket a lot. I used to for ace runs in the older versions, but I just don't really use it that much. Might put it back in the bag. Or if you want to get really aggressive, you can always go the recoil, and that one I got way up there. That might even give you a shot at, I don't know, 120 to 140 in that range. Then super aggressive is with the accurate, or the Light Glide Ballista there, which that was, I'd never really thrown that shot, so that was kind of bad aim. So if I try to readjust, I should get up and around. And again, depending on the wind, you can get really aggressive to get up to right about there. So I'm going to go ahead and jump up to that. So see this range, 135 uphill. So if you really wanted to try that out, you could get it up there without too much worry of going out of bounds. And so that was with a wind of 1 blowing left to right. So it wasn't even an ideal wind, and you kind of give yourself a reasonable shot at eagle. So pretty interesting. This is I think it's the hardest hole on the course and one of the hardest in the game. And so this hole is actually one of the reasons why I threw the musket in there, because I wanted to try it. And so the first shot I kind of turned over, but maybe not enough. And it got down there and skipped around. That actually probably would have given me a shot, maybe 70 to 80, something in that range. And so now I'm going to test it out, play a little wider. And most of the discs that you would use on this are going to finish hard left. Like the musket, the recoil, those just like to finish hard left. So you're going to have to play them to the right, and you're going to have to turn them over, force them to the right. And you also can't throw them too high. I'll probably try one here in a little bit where I really turn it over, but I throw it high, and you'll watch like the recoil, how much it comes back. So those seem like they're coming back a lot with a decent amount of roll. But again, I consider that a pretty reasonable shot on that hole. Now if I bump up to a recoil and I aim a little higher and way over here, watch this one. So over, turns, and that recoil, when it dumps hard. Still. I mean, that is just ridiculous. So I don't want to say the recoil's a bad disc for this hole, but I mean, it's a little sketchy. And then I seem to get more rollaways with drivers as well. So the recoil and the ballista have a tendency to roll a little more than your explorers or your musket. And so even trying a river, so you can disc down to a river. The problem with using a 7-speed disc like a river or an explorer is, and I actually used to use the wind accurate explorer on this hole, it's just you're starting to bring those trees into play down there. Ideally, you'd want to use a musket or something faster just to try to get up over most of those trees, not all of them. But again, that's a pretty good shot on this hole. I would be perfectly happy with that. So again, using a driver, you got to worry about that harder cut. And if you try to use the Light Glide Ballista, I mean, that's just insane. You're going to just airmail it over the top or way left. Like, I just don't think that's a smart option. All right, hole 6. The play on this one used to be slam it into the wall and let it loop around. And so what you guys are going to see is this is actually the first time I've thrown it into the wall in the 912 update. And I was actually a little surprised that it went that far. I thought they nerfed the skip a little bit, so maybe I got used to the 901 where you couldn't do this, because 1 out of every 5 or 6 throws would just hit the wall and drop right down in the little gully there. So those were actually pretty reasonable. So I'll try another one here. Again, just experimenting with angles. And so that one caught a little bit. I really don't like bringing that tree into play. I mean, that worked out really well. Anytime that tree comes into play, it's just not an ideal shot. So the shot I've actually been trying, because that was actually the first time I had used the wall, is I'll play the big stall shots. Now this right there is probably not high enough, but I'll try it anyways. And so you'll notice if you don't go high enough, it just doesn't have enough time to come back, and you're up top, and that's almost a guaranteed par. And so I'll try the same shot, but I'll aim a little higher, and you have to put a ton of hyzer on it, almost to the point of it rolling, and just hope it hits and skips down. So even with that one, the musket, which again I don't use a lot, just doesn't quite have the turn. And so what I'll do is I'll bump up to a recoil. And so using a recoil with that, I'm pretty confident that that's going to hit and go down the hill. And so once it hits right there and just slams over, and I've even had it where it hits those rocks and ricochets backwards 90 feet. And so light glide you can try, but again, that I think is a little more susceptible to weird skips. Now that one worked really well, but I've had some really weird kicks and rolls and skipaways with the light glide. So your best bet is probably to use something overstable like the recoil, or I think even in the accurate glide musket, if you got it in the bag, might not be a bad idea. So a few different options. So hole 7, if you don't have a driver, you're obviously playing this out to the right side here and just playing for birdie. And even playing for birdie is not easy because you still have a tricky upshot there. But anything straight, the river, just playing it out to the right, and maybe even trying to get a little more aggressive there. You know, get somewhere out in the flat area. I mean, that's with my driver. So that was my ballista. You can get it way out there. You still got a tricky upshot. I think most people, though, are not taking that route. They're taking the route directly at it. And so I'm going to throw the recoil first. And that's got a lot of turn, or excuse me, a lot of hyzer, so you got to be careful. But that's usually my recoil is the disc for that one. But you got to be careful with the angles. And I've had some hit and cut roll into the water. And so there's a few different ones. So this is the musket. And again, I haven't really played this course a lot with this disc and that version, but I landed there in a pretty reasonable spot. And I actually like that landing area because that tree there, there are no leaves to interfere with you. And so you can actually putt. You can't putt directly through the trunk of the tree, but you can putt through the branches or throw if you want to. And so if there's a headwind, I might throw my ballista to just kind of land it up there. Now another option is to throw it up over the top here, but you got to be careful and get the right angle. And you also can't really use anything that's too overstable. So I'll use the river here. And if I do this right, you can actually skip it off the top. I don't know if that's high enough. No, see, that wasn't high enough. But you can get it to skip right over the top and land almost like within 30 feet of the basket. I'll try again here. I think I can get... Can I get it up there and up over the top and skip, 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 skip? There you go. So there's only a few winds you can do that with, but if you do it right, you can just skip it right over there, and there's almost no risk of going in the water. But again, if you're going to do that, don't use the Explorer, don't use the musket. Anything that finishes hard left is probably going to go in the water. All right, hole 8, shooting into the cave, and you'd think that you need a driver on this one, but really you just need something accurate. Like any accurate disc, like the muskets, either the accurate windbreak or the accurate glide musket is a good choice. The river is not a bad idea, although it doesn't really carry far enough. So you can play one of those and aim in the middle and hyzer it, or force turnover. Or you could throw a driver here, like a recoil. And there's actually an option where you can throw, so the recoil, that's not bad. The windbreak is usually reasonably accurate. I'll try it again here. I'd like to throw the light glide ballistas because there's ways to throw it in there. That's actually going to be a tap in. Crap. So you're not going to get to see the light glide ballista. Maybe I'll do that later. But as you can see, you can park it under the basket with the recoil with no problems. And then hole 9, the safe play is out here. I usually don't do it, so I don't have this speed dialed in. So that might actually be a little too far. Yeah, it's too fast. And so to dial down the distance, you can use the fuse, but throw it sidearm. So I'm going to try that again, but I'm going to aim a little bit to the right just to slide it up there. And so if you don't have access to some of the high-speed discs, you can always throw that and just leave it in a nice spot right about there. And then to get it up, I'm not going to take that drive, but to get it up there, you do need to power it up there. I think most people, though, are going for this left ledge, so I'm going to throw the musket over there. But if you're over on the right ledge, remember that you've got that wall as a backdrop. So if you're thinking about what disc to use, always go one disc higher and just slam it into that back wall. Throw a driver. So I will most likely throw a recoil under most circumstances and just get it somewhere in there. If you've watched my Pro Tour video, I threw this hole on a couple rounds and I landed it over there. One of them I almost made it, and another one I actually eagled from over there. And there is, in the older versions, you had certain winds. You could throw the light glide ballista and actually make it all the way up there to get an eagle. I don't think that's possible. I won't say it's impossible because I haven't really tried it, but I would be surprised if you can actually get it all the way to the basket. And so probably the safest bet here is just throw the recoil, get it out to about right there. Anything, even my worst shots are inside 220. And so if I get close enough, I will probably throw a fuse. See the distance, 171, so I'll probably throw a sidearm fuse. And for those of you that are using the fuse as a putter, the sidearm is kind of the equivalent of a putter for me. So I'm going to throw this and try to make it. And I missed it. I want to throw that again. I'm going to throw this a few times to see if I can make it. And so I'm just going to keep throwing. And I'll maybe give this a few times, like 4 or 5 times. And if I don't make it, I'll leave. But I'm going to actually try to make this. And so if you're a little further out, I'd say mid 180s, maybe a little more than that, you might want to bump up to a river or an explorer. I've holed this hole out with an explorer so many times I lost track. And so it's definitely one, if it's early in a daily tournament, you probably want to get this one. So I'm just not quite getting this one. I'll try aim a little to the right, and I'm just kind of getting bored with this hole. So yeah, we'll call it. And then from here, just have some fun. I'm not going to putt it. I'm going to slam it in there as hard as I can. And so even in the 9-12 update, you can miss those. So that was just a few different ways to throw each of these holes. And so now what I might try is, so I mean, again, we're not trying for a score there of plus 55. What I might do now is actually make a legitimate run through it to show you what I would throw if I was actually trying to score well on this. And I'll go ahead and keep the same discs in the bag and see what happens. So there are some tricky holes on this course, but the only one that really worries me is that big downhill par 3. I mean, hole 1, again, I don't know if I agree with this being the easiest rated hole in the game, but it is a pretty standard birdie that you should never really miss unless you're trying to ace run it. So hole 2, if you watch the first part of the video, this is just fuse all day long. And now I actually want to get it close. I mean, tap-ins are nice. Again, I don't see any reason why you should ever miss holes 1 and 2 if you have a fuse and or an explorer or river. So this one, kind of depending on the wind, so a wind of 2, I'm definitely going to go for this. So we're going to throw the recoil, put a little hyzer on it, and I almost didn't turn this over enough, and almost aced it. So that's kind of nice. Now the problem with using drivers is sometimes you get that rolling down the hill, and I've actually had it roll all the way backwards into the water, which sucks, but with that wind, with a wind of 2 going right to left, there's really no reason why you should not eagle that one unless you just don't have the discs. Let's see, this one, wind of 3 left to right, there's 0 chance of going up over the top, so we're just going to play nice, easy shot, play the fuse. I mean, there's just hoping it lands in there. And so here, sometimes I'll throw, if I have the Explorer in the bag, which I normally throw, I'll throw that. But here I'm just going to throw the fuse up over the top. And I actually went too long. And so now here's a good lesson for you guys. You're behind a tree, and so you can straddle out to the right. The problem with doing that is if you get near the edge of the tree, you have to ask yourself the question, am I going to hit the branches or am I not going to hit the branches? So what I did right there, and if you didn't notice, go back in the video, I actually moved back into the tree. The reason for that is if I'm on the edge of the tree, I may throw it really hard and then it doesn't catch any branches. And then I go way long. So that one I actually moved back into the tree to make sure that I would hit the tree, and then I just powered right through it. So that's a little tip you can use. So this is the one I was worried about, hole 5, and I threw the musket, and that was just awful. So this is probably a hole where I will come back in and practice a little bit with the, I don't know what disc I'm going to use on this one, because I usually bring a river and an explorer. So I'll mess around with that a little bit. And I've got to look here. I don't know if I can get by the tree. And so that was actually a really good shot. I think if I swing that any further to the left, it's going to hit the branches. But going back to that last hole, though, there are some times where you actually move a little back into the tree to guarantee you hit the branches, and then you can feel more comfortable just powering the crap out of that disc. All right, so this one we've got a very unfavorable wind, so I'm definitely going to throw the windbreak, glide, recoil, and just have it slam down there. And so that one got an okay kick. I'm fine with that. But if you've got that wind, and here 50 feet, I'm definitely putting that. If you got that wind blowing left to right, you almost have to use a windbreak disc, because if you try to use, for example, your light glide ballista, I don't know if it's going to have enough to slam down in. It might get pushed back to the right. So this one we'll throw a recoil, and I'm going to play this a little wider and actually try to ace run it and see what happens. And right about there, I thought it's not going to come back, but it actually fought its way back. Don't roll. Sit. Okay, we're good. So I think I'm actually inside 50. Yeah, 43. So even though you're putting here, you are downhill a little bit. So you have to be aware of your elevation. If it's a little uphill or a little downhill, you have to adjust. So that 43 footer, I had to adjust a little down. Okay, so I didn't get a chance to use the light glide ballista here, so I'm going to go ahead and try it. So I'm going to aim somewhere over here and just try to slam it in the tunnel. And I've aced this many times going in that tunnel. Throw it in there, miss the wall. It is not going to miss. So, I mean, that's risky. If you want to ace it, that's great. But remember, when you're using the light glide ballista, you have that wobble effect. So it has a tendency to go left or right. So you very easily could miss the cave entirely. So you got to be careful of that. Then hole 9, as I said before, I'm just going to throw the recoil, slam it in. If I'm inside 170, I'll use the sidearm. Back here, I'm probably 210, yeah, 219. So this is most definitely a river shot or explorer, which I don't have the explorer in the bag. And so give it a run. That's probably not going to go. No, that was reasonably close though. I hit the basket halo. So got my birdie. Nothing spectacular. A couple nice eagles, but 21. I think 21 should get you 3 stars on that. So hopefully you've enjoyed the tips on Crowsnest here, and gives you some ideas of the different shots to throw. And there's such a wide variety. There's no one shot for any hole. So go with what works, even if you use something non-traditional like a pioneer or a dagger. I say go with what works, and hopefully some of the shots I've shown you in this video will help you make better decisions.